Hey, Emily, how long are you going to sleep? Huh? Suddenly, the blanket was ripped off, and I opened my eyes in surprise to see my mother-in-law standing there. What time is it? It's only 7 a.m. It's already 7 a.m. I've been up since 5, you know? I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. I'm tired of that excuse. Get up and start preparing breakfast. I had reached my limit. Somehow lifting my heavy body, I left the house without a word to my mother-in-law or to John. What's that about? Dr. Smith, my doctor, turned pale after hearing about what my mother-in-law and husband had said to me. I'm sorry for taking your private time with this story. That's not important right now. You've done really well so far. With those words, Dr. Smith gave me a tight hug. Suddenly, I felt all the tension drain from my body, as if all the stress had finally been released. Oh, my stomach hurts. Huh? Ouch, it really hurts. It was a unique kind of pain I had never felt before. As I looked up at Dr. Smith, wondering if this could be it, she nodded solemnly. It's labor pains. Apparently, the sense of relief from having shared everything with Dr. Smith triggered the onset of labor. But then, I got a call on my cell phone from my husband. Hey, Emily. Where are you right now? You left without saying anything. You ignored what Mom said too. What are you thinking? Yeah, Emily. You really need to step up as a wife. Startled by the immediate angry voices of John and my mother-in-law, I involuntarily jerked my shoulders. This is Dr. Smith, Emily's doctor. Emily is about to give birth, so she can't come home. Don't use childbirth as an excuse to skip housework. Come back home right now, useless wife. Okay. However, John and my mother-in-law were left stunned by the action taken by Dr. Smith and me afterward. My name is Emily Brown. I'm 32 years old. I've been married to John for 5 years, but we've been struggling to have a child and we're considering fertility treatments. Then one day, after a period of feeling unwell, I visited the doctor and discovered I was pregnant. Yeah, the heartbeat is strong. Congratulations, you're pregnant. Really? Yes. My attending doctor was a woman named Dr. Smith. She seemed to be about my age, with a kind smile. She was efficient in her work and understood my feelings, explaining everything about my pregnancy in an easy-to-understand manner. Please make sure to come in for regular checkups. I will. I was so happy, I couldn't wait to tell John. That night, when John came home, I told him I had been to the gynecologist. Yeah, you've been looking unwell lately. How did it go? Actually, we're going to have a baby. What? Really? When I shared the news, John's eyes widened in surprise, then he smiled joyfully. Thank you, Emily. We've finally done it. Yeah. We hugged each other, overflowing with happiness. But then, John's next words made my mood drop. We need to tell my mom right away. Oh, yeah. John's mother. In other words, she's my mother-in-law. Actually, I've been a bit uncomfortable with her since the beginning of my marriage. She's, well, a bit too set in her ways, or rather, she's quite stubborn. Once she decides on something, she never budges, like she's stuck with fixed ideas. And she adores John to an extreme extent. I still vividly remember the scrutinizing look she gave me when we went to announce our marriage. Even at our wedding, I wanted to choose a wedding dress, but she insisted I wear the same dress she wore for her own wedding. When choosing our house, she made sure we picked a place close to John's family home, somewhere convenient for her to visit. I had planned to continue working after getting married, but she forced me to quit my job. Because of all this, I've tried to avoid her as much as possible. But now that I'm pregnant, I wonder how she'll react. Will she impose her ideas on what I should do during pregnancy? And even more depressing is that John always does whatever she says. Basically, John always thinks that whatever his mother says is right. It's almost like he's been brainwashed since he was a child, such is the absolute authority his mother's words hold for John. So, when I wanted to wear a wedding dress, he just said, "Why? Mom has her dress, right?" He readily agreed to her conditions about our living place, and when I said I wanted to work because I was worried about our future, he took her side saying, "But Mom said she wants you to take care of the house." When both of them say such things, I, being someone who's not good at standing up for myself, sadly get swayed. Mom was really happy. She said she's coming over tomorrow. Nice. John, having just finished a phone call with his mother, said this with a happy expression. I secretly let out a sigh, hoping he wouldn't notice. I just hoped that tomorrow would be a peaceful day. Contrary to my wish, the storm arrived the next morning at 7 a.m. Startled awake by the early morning doorbell, I saw my mother-in-law's face. It was Saturday. John had the day off too, and I thought we could have a leisurely morning, but I didn't expect my mother-in-law's visit to be this early. Good morning. Good morning, Emily. Oh, did I catch you just waking up? How sloppy, what time do you think it is? That should be my line. I think it's abnormal to storm in on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m., but for my mother-in-law, and consequently for John, she's always right. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have gotten up earlier to prepare. It's okay for you, John. You work hard on weekdays. It's fine to take it easy on your day off. Mom, you're so kind. I watched John and his mother chatting happily, forcing out a dry laugh. Lately, being in the early stages of pregnancy, I've had many days of unstable health. Yet, here I was being treated as if I was a bad wife, and it hurt. That's right, you're pregnant, aren't you? Congratulations. I'm just so happy. Thank you. I awkwardly thanked my smiling mother-in-law. Then John said, I wanted to ask Mom something. Actually, Emily has been feeling unwell lately. With the early stages of pregnancy, I've heard that health can be unstable. Do you have any advice to make her feel a bit better, as someone who's been through childbirth? When John said this, I instinctively knew it was a bad idea. I was genuinely happy that he was concerned about me. He truly cares about my well-being, and I know he's a kind person at heart. But the person he was asking was the worst possible choice. Oh, really? That's strange. I never had any health issues during my early pregnancy. Really? I thought this was the worst. The severity of morning sickness varies greatly from person to person. At the doctor, I was diagnosed as having severe morning sickness. I'm constantly dizzy from anemia, and strong smells make me nauseous. I've had terrible headaches and sometimes couldn't even get out of bed. But that's a pain only those who've experienced it can understand. Generally, pregnancy isn't an illness. There's no way it would make you feel unwell. With that, my mother-in-law laughed mockingly through her nose. Indeed, that's right, pregnancy isn't an illness, so it shouldn't be hard. And you're just taking advantage of kind John, aren't you? He's tired from work, so you should be doing the housework properly. Got it? To make matters worse, John seemed convinced by his mother's words. Feeling desperate, I could only weakly respond with a yes to my mother-in-law's words. But I understand it's your first pregnancy and you're anxious. Huh? That's why I'm thinking of staying here for a while. What? I let out a loud exclamation at my mother-in-law's sudden announcement. Actually, when I went to greet her at the front door earlier, I was a bit puzzled to see her pulling a suitcase. I had assumed her early morning visit was because she was perhaps going on a trip, but it turns out the suitcase was packed with her things for an extended stay. No! I'm fine, really. The thought of even a short-term cohabitation with my mother-in-law filled me with anxiety. She had already made preparations to move in without even considering my opinion, and I dread to think what living together would be like. But Emily, you don't have your own family, right? You must be feeling insecure alone. That's... At my mother-in-law's words, I was taken aback, as she had hit the nail on the head. My mother passed away due to illness when I was a child. My father, who raised me single-handedly, died in an accident right after I got married. With no other relatives or siblings, I was what you'd call completely alone. The doctors at the clinic have been very kind and understanding. But still, they are strangers after all. It's definitely better for me to be here. John thinks so too, right? Yeah. Having Mom, who raised me to be who I am, by my side makes me feel incredibly reassured. I inwardly groaned at John's beaming agreement. But it's not good to leave your family home for too long. John's father had also passed away from illness just before we got married. Since then, John moved out immediately after our marriage, and I suppose my mother-in-law feels lonely and comes to us. Of course, I don't deny her feelings, but after over 5 years, I thought it was time she let go a bit. A little while should be fine. Besides, I'm sure John's father would want John to be supported. It seemed my mother-in-law's support was always for John, not me. Earlier, she said she was worried about me being pregnant for the first time, but her real intention was probably just to be with John. Perhaps to my mother-in-law, I might even be considered a nuisance. Well then, Mom, please take care of everything until the baby is born. However, John, completely oblivious, irresponsibly agreed to his mother's stay with such a carefree remark. Since my mother-in-law moved in, my health, far from improving, has only gotten worse. The reason was clear: stress. Emily, look, this spot is still dirty. Can't you even clean properly? I'm sorry, I'll redo it right away. Lying down again. I keep telling you, being pregnant isn't an illness. If you're like this now, how will you manage when the baby comes? I'm just feeling really nauseous. How long will you take to do the dishes? When I was your age, I was much more efficient. I'm just feeling really heavy. I had read about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law battles, but now it was happening in my own home. Every day, I was bombarded with constant nitpicking and nagging, only able to respond with repeated apologies. Such days made me mentally unstable. At first, I thought it was just the maternity blues, but it was clearly my mother-in-law's doing. When I talked to John, he would just repeat, "But if Mom says so, it must be true." Eventually, he started saying irritably, "You know, Emily, aren't you exaggerating a bit? Pregnancy isn't an illness, you understand?" With my mother-in-law agreeing with him, John began to treat me harshly. "Mom said she managed, so you just want to take it easy, right?" "No, it's not like that. Morning sickness really varies from person to person. But you're just lying down every day. I'm working hard for our upcoming child, so you should at least take care of the house." Now, even John blamed me, and my morning sickness never improved, even as I approached the due date. Then, one day, something decisive happened. It was a Saturday, and John had the day off. I felt terrible, and since John was still asleep, I thought I'd sleep a bit more and closed my eyes. That's when it happened. "Hey, Emily, how long are you going to sleep?" "Huh?" Suddenly, the blanket was ripped off, and as I opened my eyes in shock, there stood my mother-in-law. "What time? It's only 7 a.m. "It's already 7 a.m. I've been up since 5, you know?" "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well." "I'm tired of that excuse. Hurry up and get up, you need to prepare breakfast." I had reached my limit. Somehow, I managed to get my heavy body up and, without telling my mother-in-law or John, I finally left the house. I couldn't stay there anymore. I felt like I was going to lose my mind if I stayed. A heavily pregnant woman wandering around in her pajamas must have looked quite suspicious. But at that moment, I couldn't afford to think about such things. I just wanted to go somewhere quiet and peaceful. That was all I could think of. "Emily?" "Oh. Dr. Smith?" As I aimlessly wandered, I was unexpectedly addressed. I looked up slowly to see Dr. Smith, my doctor, standing in front of me with a trash bag. "What are you doing out here dressed like that?" "And you, Dr. Smith, why are you here?" "This is my house," she said, pointing to a single-family house in front of us. "As your doctor, I can't just ignore this. Please come inside for a moment." Dr. Smith quickly threw her trash in the garbage and pulled me into her house. She made me sit on the sofa and brought me some warm tea, smiling as she said, "Here you go." Her kindness made tears well up in my eyes.
What exactly happened?
Sitting next to me and gently stroking my back, Dr. Smith listened as I cried and told her everything without holding anything back.
What?
After hearing my story, Dr. Smith murmured that, her face turning pale. "I'm sorry for bothering you during your private time. That doesn't matter right now. You've done really well so far." With those words, Dr. Smith hugged me tightly. Suddenly, I felt all the tension drained from my body, as if all the stress had been released.
I knew she was trouble, but I didn't expect her to go this far.
Huh?
Emily.
Yes? I tilted my head, puzzled as Dr. Smith suddenly called my name. But before she could say anything, I noticed something odd happening to my body.
Oh! My stomach hurts.
Huh?
Ouch! It really hurts.
It was a unique kind of pain I had never felt before. As I looked up at Dr. Smith, wondering if this could be it, she nodded solemnly.
It's labor pains.
Apparently, the relief from having shared everything with Dr. Smith triggered the onset of labor. I'll manage to get to the hospital right away. Just lie down there. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. This is what I do for a living. You should only be thinking about yourself and your baby now. Really, that's what you should have been doing all throughout your pregnancy.
Dr. Smith quietly muttered with frustration, then quickly called an ambulance. While waiting for the ambulance, she kept talking to me, ensuring I felt reassured, holding my hand the entire time. Despite the unfamiliar pain, I felt this was the most secure moment I had had during my entire pregnancy. But this peaceful time was soon interrupted. The only thing I had brought with me, my smartphone, started vibrating with an incoming call. The name on the screen was my husband, John, and I instinctively gripped Dr. Smith's hand tightly. Let's see what he has to say.
Huh?
Emily, let me borrow this for a moment. Saying this, Dr. Smith took my phone and tapped the call button. And then she turned on the speaker mode.
Hey, Emily. Where are you right now? You left without saying anything. You ignored Mom's words too. What are you thinking? Yeah, Emily. You really need to step up as a wife.
Startled by the immediate angry voices of John and my mother-in-law, I involuntarily jerked my shoulders. Dr. Smith here, Emily's doctor. Emily is about to give birth, so she can't come home.
What? Who are you? Don't interfere in our family matters.
Firmly informed by Dr. Smith, John responded with those words. Even after telling them I was about to give birth, they were still saying such things.
Don't use childbirth as an excuse to skip housework. Come back home right now, useless wife. Okay.
I couldn't burden Dr. Smith any further. The labor pains had started, but it wouldn't be immediate. I decided to go back home and hung up the call. I'm sorry, Dr. Smith. I'll go home.
What are you saying? That's not okay. As your doctor, I can't allow that. But, ouch. See, the intervals between contractions are getting shorter. You might give birth soon. What should I do?
Just then, the ambulance arrived at Dr. Smith's house. I was quickly placed on a stretcher and moved to the ambulance. When calling the ambulance, Dr. Smith had informed them she was my doctor, so they headed to her hospital. I'm sorry, change of destination. Please head here. But Dr. Smith directed them to my home address, handing it to the paramedics.
Dr. Smith!
It's okay. I'm with you. The paramedics, though confused, promptly followed Dr. Smith's precise instructions. As the ambulance redirected towards my home, it seemed I had a water break. The intervals of labor pains shortened rapidly, and I clenched my teeth in unbearable pain.
Emily, hold on.
Dr. Smith kept speaking to me with determination. Finally, the ambulance arrived at my home, and I was carried inside on the stretcher.
Emily! You were really giving birth!
Seeing me being brought in by the paramedics, John and my mother-in-law were wide-eyed in shock. Then, when they saw Dr. Smith entering the house with me, John exclaimed in surprise, "Sis." Amidst my fading consciousness, John's words echoed in my mind.
Your sister!
I knew John had a sister. But she apparently didn't get along well with the family, especially my mother-in-law. After my father-in-law passed away, she left home and had been out of touch since then. She hadn't attended our wedding, and I had never met her, so I didn't even know her face. I thought I'd never meet her since my mother-in-law said they had cut ties, but Dr. Smith?
You called them, so you're responsible. Help out until the end. Hurry, get some clean bath towels. Oh, yes!
While my mother-in-law stood there stunned, John, scolded by Dr. Smith, hurried to the bathroom for towels. Soon, my labor pains reached their peak. There's a metaphor about the pain being like pushing a watermelon through your nose, and I genuinely thought it wasn't far from the truth. Yet, my beloved child came out relatively easily. The sound of a healthy cry filled the house.
Congratulations, it's a healthy boy. I'm so relieved.
Dr. Smith showed me my newborn son, his wrinkled face crying hard. The wrinkled face of my baby, crying hard, was incredibly dear to me. I then successfully completed the afterbirth process. Everything ended more smoothly than I expected, but I was utterly exhausted, physically and mentally. John and my mother-in-law were moved, looking at the child in Dr. Smith's arms.
Sis, let me hold him too. Me too.
Before that, don't you two owe Emily an apology? Dr. Smith sharply and coldly reprimanded the two of them, who were excitedly raising their voices. Really, nothing has changed. Do you know why I left this house? A mother with rigid ideas and a brother who's just her puppet. It's creepy. Dr. Smith, having gently placed the baby down, scolded them both. A mother rigid with fixed ideas and a brother like her puppet. Dr. Smith's words were so spot on, I couldn't help but be impressed by their accuracy. I didn't know at first that Emily was John's wife. But then, the surname Brown, and hearing about the mother-in-law and husband during checkups, it was just like Mom and John. I did some research, and to my surprise, she was my sister-in-law. Dr. Smith. I'm sorry, Emily. If I had realized sooner, I could have saved you from being pushed so far. I hastily shook my head in denial. It wasn't like that. Dr. Smith had supported me a lot. She was an incredibly reliable ally. I was able to safely give birth to my baby because of Dr. Smith. I shook my head to convey that Dr. Smith was not to blame, but my mother-in-law seemed to misinterpret it as me denying Dr. Smith. What's with the attitude? You're just a stranger who cut ties with us, right? What do you know about family? At least more than you about the struggles and hardships of a pregnant woman. Emily had severe morning sickness, and you made her work like that? Being pregnant isn't an illness, so of course she should be able to do that much.
Don't be ridiculous. Emily safely gave birth today because she persevered. Despite the unreasonable treatment from both of you, she stayed strong for her child.
Dr. Smith spoke so clearly, and I felt a weight lift off my heart. Someone acknowledged my unseen efforts. Despite the pain and difficulty, I was determined to endure for my child, and here was someone praising that determination. I couldn't be happier. Dr. Smith. It's okay, enough. I called out to Dr. Smith, who looked like she was about to confront my mother-in-law with a fiery intensity. Dr. Smith turned to me immediately, still looking unconvinced, but when I shook my head, she stepped back. Well, if Emily says it's okay.
Sis, that's terrible. How can you say such things to Mom? Emily is appalled too. From here on, we will take care of Emily and the child. Outsiders, leave.
It's you two who should leave.
What?
I somehow managed to sit up, despite my exhaustion from childbirth. I repeated firmly to a startled John. You two should leave. I want a divorce. I'll raise this child on my own.
What? Emily, what are you saying? I've woken up. I endured everything thinking I had to for the sake of the child, but now I realize it's best to leave this awful environment for my child's sake. Awful? What are you talking about? I'm just stating the obvious.
Obvious? Based on what?
Well, because Mom said so.
John glanced briefly at my mother-in-law, who nodded vigorously, backing him up. My mother-in-law nodded vigorously, as if to back up John, saying, "That's exactly right. Emily, you're making too much fuss over just a pregnancy.
Pregnancy and childbirth can be life-threatening. Don't treat it so lightly."
Dr. Smith retorted sharply to my mother-in-law's sigh-laden words. Confronted strongly by her own daughter, my mother-in-law, left without a rebuttal, could only fall silent. With her silence, John suddenly seemed less confident. I should have divorced him much earlier.
I'll consult a lawyer about future matters. I will claim for the mental distress I suffered during pregnancy and child support.
For the first time, I asserted myself against John and my mother-in-law. The fact that the subject was divorce carried a certain irony, but perhaps surprised by my uncharacteristically adamant stance, neither John nor my mother-in-law said anything more in response. Soon after, my newborn child and I were transported to the hospital where Dr. Smith works. Given the unusual circumstances of the birth, it was advised to check for any harm to my body. Of course, it was also to ensure my baby's safety.
I'm sorry for having to deliver at home like this, even though it couldn't be helped.
What are you saying? Without Dr. Smith, I don't know if my baby and I would have been safe. If I had been taken to the hospital, I probably would have tried to go home anyway. Thinking about it, I might have been brainwashed by my mother-in-law and John too. But seeing Dr. Smith firmly scolding them, I fully woke up.
Are you really going to divorce? I mean, I highly recommend it.
Yes, I have no regrets.
There are systems and support for single parents, and it's better to struggle a bit and raise my child alone than in that house.
That's good.
If there's anything I can help with, just let me know.
Really? Even though I'll no longer be your sister-in-law?
Before being a sister-in-law, you're my patient. And, how about we be friends from now on?
Dr. Smith smiled kindly and said that, and I happily responded with a loud yes. It seems that my baby and I will be hospitalized for 1 or 2 days. After finishing the explanation, Dr. Smith told me to press the nurse call button immediately if I had any worries or problems, and then she left the room. Right after that, there was a gentle knock on the hospital room door. Thinking Dr. Smith might have forgotten to say something, I called out, "Come in." John. To my surprise, it wasn't Dr. Smith who entered, but John.
Emily, I was wrong. Can you wait for the divorce?
Huh? I gazed at John, who looked contrite as he began to fumble his words.
I sided with Mom too much. You were jealous, right?
What? Completely off the mark. I was dumbfounded.
Remember, I told you Mom and my sister didn't get along? Mom was happy when you came into our family, like she got her daughter back. She paid too much attention to you, but now I realize that and regret it.
Everything he said was wrong. What is this man even talking about? I let out a sigh. If my mother-in-law really thought my marriage was like getting her daughter back, then Dr. Smith must have endured the same treatment since she was young. No wonder she wanted to escape.
Dad died, and my sister left, then I got married. Mom must have been lonely. It's cruel to ignore that, right? But I told you several times how hard it was for me. Wasn't it cruel to ignore that?
It wasn't just once or twice I complained about how hard the morning sickness was. Yet, you dismissed it as just my imagination or said it wasn't a big deal, denying my struggles with mere assumptions and prejudice, didn't you?
Well, that's... John never once stood up for me. Thinking about enduring this any longer, I feel like I'm losing my mind. So I won't reconsider the divorce. Then, could you maybe reduce the alimony and child support a bit?
What? Now what is he saying? I glared at John. Is he trying to negotiate alimony and child support?
Actually, Mom has debts.
What? Really?
She never worked. When Dad was alive, his salary was pretty good, so she didn't worry about money. But after he died, she lived off the inheritance.
Didn't you say your father was wealthy? John works for a major company, and his sister, Dr. Smith, is a doctor. I had heard their family was well off.
Mom's sense of money is a bit off. She doesn't want to lower the quality of life she had when Dad was working.
Not earning her own money and not wanting to cut down on living standards while depleting a finite inheritance, it was inevitable that they'd run out of money. Knowing all this, John didn't say anything?
So, our household might be tight on money soon. Could you reduce the alimony and child support by half?
He was asking hopefully, knowing that I'm usually not assertive. But I had to part ways with that version of myself. Because from now on, I need to live firmly as a mother.
Absolutely not. What? I won't give up even a single cent of what I've suffered or the money I'll use for our child. I've already discussed this with my lawyer. I don't care about any debts, that's your mother's problem, not yours. But my mother's debt is my debt too.
Hearing John's response, I realized that in his own way, he too was a victim. However, it's not like he was trapped by his mother. He worked at a regular job and married me. He had as many chances as Dr. Smith to distance himself from his mother, but he chose not to.
Then do as you like. It's no longer my concern. Don't say that. Please reconsider.
Then, would you promise to cut ties with your mother and never see her again?
Why does it have to come to that? Emily, you've always been against my mom.
It's the other way around. I've been the target.
My mom would never do such terrible things.
We were clearly at an impasse. Silently, I pressed the nurse call button. Dr. Smith arrived almost immediately. What are you doing here?
Sis.
Get out now. If you stay any longer, I'll call the police. After Dr. Smith's stern warning, John, clenching his teeth in frustration, threw a parting shot, "You'll regret this," and left the room. The hell of a sore loser, rare in recent times. I couldn't help but laugh at Dr. Smith's comment as we watched John leave. Following that, my divorce from John was successfully finalized through a lawyer, and I was able to leave the hospital with my son, healthy and well. During my hospital stay, I spent time learning about systems and protections beneficial for single mothers, following Dr. Smith's advice, and completing various procedures. Thanks to this, life with my son in our new home started smoothly. John had since moved out of our shared home, returning to live with his mother. Apparently, John and his mother are now repaying their debts together, while also paying me a substantial amount in alimony, which includes his mother's share, and struggling to come up with monthly child support, all the while trying to pay off the debts incurred by his mother. Despite their situation, he still seems to believe in his mother. There's a saying, what's bred in the bone will not come out of the flesh, but people can change over time. Indeed, Dr. Smith, who is John's sister, is now my friend. She spent her childhood under the same roof, but her values changed after meeting her husband, realizing her mother's oddity, and she left home. Perhaps I didn't have the strength to change John like Dr. Smith's husband did. No, that's just the way he is. He hates taking responsibility, always doing what he's told, so he can claim he's not at fault. Annoying, right? Saying that, Dr. Smith stuck out her tongue. I laughed at her funny expression. In my arms, my beloved son slept peacefully, a serene expression on his face. I might have lost many things, but I chose this path to protect my irreplaceable treasure. As a mother, I want to continue living strongly for my son.